Very good morning. Welcome to Breakfast with John Kay and Louise Minchin.
Morning. Our headlines today: containing the spread of the new variant of coronavirus. A top government advisor warns that tougher restrictions will be needed in more parts of England.
It is likely that this will grow in numbers of the variant across the country, and I think it's likely, therefore, that measures need to be increased in some places in due course, not reduced.
The French government is to announce plans to lift the cross-channel travel ban. Lorry drivers have spent a second night in their cabs waiting at the port of Dover.
The government said last night there were almost 1,000 lorries parked up on the motorway, but driving around Dover this morning there are HGVs everywhere. The figure is likely to be much, much higher.
And that's led to concern around food supplies. Salad from Italy, peppers from Spain. We're all right for now, but the longer this goes on, the greater the risk.
Good morning. Rugby league legend Kevin Sinfield adds his voice to calls for more research into concussion. He says it's important not to make assumptions about the links between rugby league and brain injuries.
Good morning. It's another cloudy day in the south. There'll be rain at times, but still very mild for the time of year. Whereas in the north, it's colder, there's more sunshine and just a few showers. I'll have all the details in about 10 minutes.
Hello, good morning. Tuesday, the 22nd of December, and our top story is that the government's chief scientific advisor has warned that tougher restrictions are likely to be needed in more areas of England to control that new variant of coronavirus.
Sir Patrick Vallance said further measures may be required to counter a likely increase in cases as a result of Christmas mixing. Mr Vallance said the more infectious form of the virus needs to be taken very seriously, as John Donnison reports.
In London and the South East, around 17 million people are already living under the tightest Tier 4 restrictions. But now a warning from the government's chief scientific advisor that stricter measures are likely to be needed in more areas of England to try to control the virus.
It is likely that this will grow in numbers of the variant across the country, and I think it's likely, therefore, that measures need to be increased in some places in due course, not reduced.
Just 3 days before Christmas, already many have had to change their plans.
I was due to go down to my parents' place for Christmas Day, but we're not going to be doing that anymore.
We were going to have Christmas with 6 other people in our house, and they're not coming now.
In Greater Manchester and the West Midlands, health officials have said anyone visiting their regions from Tier 4 areas and from Wales should self-isolate for 10 days. It comes amid concerns about a particular new variant of the virus, which the government says has led to a surge in new infections. It has 17 key differences in its genetic makeup, the result of random mutations, and roughly half of those changes are in the spike protein, possibly making it bind to human cells more effectively.
It's likely to be more transmissible because it's the dominant strain just now. But that is not only dependent on the virus, it's also dependent on people's behavior. And so we need to see whether it's the behavior, whether that was spreading and that's accounting for all of these new infections now, or whether it's really the strain that's easier to transmit from person to person.
The hope remains that an expanded rollout of vaccines next year will make all the difference. But things could well get worse before they get better. John Donnison, BBC News.
The French government says it will announce measures today that will allow transport links with Britain to resume and trade to flow across the Channel again.
Yeah, the question is, when will that happen? Boris Johnson and President Macron spoke last night following France's decision to close its border after growing concern about the new variant of coronavirus. Here's our transport correspondent, Caroline Davis.
Still, they wait. Lorry and van drivers stand around the entrance of the port of Dover.
24 hours since the French closed their borders to all traffic from the UK with passengers. And still tonight, there are lorries turning up and being diverted away. Border guards here to divert them too.
Parked up on a nearby street were vans and cars filled with people waiting for the border to reopen, preparing to sleep in their vehicles. But still more were arriving. This was the approach into Dover's port. On the M20, Highways England confirmed that over 900 vehicles were parked up last night. They're being redirected to Manston Airfield, while the French border is closed to lorries carrying goods with drivers. Operation Brock, a contraflow layout intended to keep the traffic on the M20 motorway to the coast moving, was also introduced overnight. The European Union has said that it's up to the individual member states to decide what restrictions to place on travellers from Britain and how long to keep them in place. There's no certainty yet on when vehicles will be able to cross from the UK to France, but the government has said that work continues at pace. Caroline Davis, BBC News.
Let's go live to the port of Dover now and speak to our news correspondent Simon Jones, who's there for breakfast this morning. Simon, there's been a bit of confusion about how many lorries have been stuck, different figures offered by the Transport Secretary last night and then by Highways England. What have you managed to suss out?
Yes, yesterday at the news conference, Boris Johnson said he thought there were around 170 lorries parked up on the M20 motorway in Operation Stack. By last night, the Department for Transport said that figure had gone up to more than 1,000. But driving around Kent this morning, there are lorries parked up pretty much everywhere, every lay-by, every car park. So the number of HGVs caught up in this overall in Kent is likely to be much, much higher than that 1,000 figure. Now here at the entrance to the Port of Dover, still pretty extraordinary sight. Just 3 days to Christmas. This is one of the busiest passenger ferry terminals in the world, and no traffic at all going over towards France. What is the way out of this? Well, we're expecting some sort of announcement from the EU today that could involve anyone wanting to cross the channel to have a negative coronavirus test. But if you consider the number of lorry drivers caught up in all this, the operation that would take to introduce this testing to ensure that everyone had these negative results and then being able to prove it at the border to get across, that would be a massive operation. So the sad reality is, for some lorry drivers, it looks like they may well be spending Christmas in their cabs rather than back home.
Oh dear. Simon Jones, thank you very much indeed.
It is understood that people arriving in Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK will be asked to self-isolate for 10 days. The Northern Ireland Executive voted against imposing a travel ban from Britain, fearing it could have serious implications for the viability of air and ferry routes. But it is advising people to avoid non-essential journeys.
Royal Mail has suspended deliveries to Europe, except the Irish Republic, because of those travel bans. The firm says it's also experiencing delays to Canada and to Turkey. Meanwhile, the courier company DHL has stopped all package deliveries to the UK.
US President-elect Joe Biden has received his first dose of the Pfizer Covid-19 vaccine live on television. Vice President Mike Pence and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi have also had the jab. Mr. Biden, who's 78 and considered to be in a high-risk group, said he was getting it to show Americans it is safe to take and urged Americans to get it as soon as it became available.
See the headlines as they happen and watch BBC News live in the app and get the full story with bbc.co.uk/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.